All right. Well, welcome to Men Are Forged podcast. I've got a great guest today, and I did the mistake I always make is I didn't ask him how to pronounce his last name, but his name's Brent. Let's see if I get it. You want to see if I can get it?
Yeah, try
Brent.
again.
My phonetic skills are terrible. Giannotta.
Giannotta. Yeah, you got it.
Giannotta, there it is. Brent Giannotta. All right, coming all the way from Pasadena, SoCal. California, beautiful place. Oh golly, Brent, I could sit here and still sit in the stadium as the sun is going down behind me in the Rose Bowl and
Yep.
seeing the sun hit what is those mountains right there?
Yeah, the Sierra Nevada, the Mount Wilson is right
Oh, and
there.
it's
Yeah.
just so beautiful.
Yeah.
So that's where that's where you're living right now. Yeah, but you grew up in LA. You said Santa Monica area.
I was born in Santa Monica on the west side at St. John's Hospital, pretty close, like I'm a quarter mile from the beach. And then when I was 7, my family moved out here to Pasadena. I went to USC in LA. And then I was on the East Coast for about 15 years. And then COVID made the whole world a little weird, which suddenly made it make a lot more sense to come back. So I got back here about a year and a half ago. And yeah, I can't complain. Looking out the window, it's bright and sunny, about 70 degrees. So yeah, good decision so far.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, let's just kind of backtrack a little bit. Early days growing up, what was some of your favorite childhood memories?
My childhood was really good. Really good, probably top 10% all
wow.
told. So I have great parents who my father happened to make a lot of money. He still does. They were great to me, my 2 sisters. Pretty idyllic childhood. Pretty big house. I had a Catholic school upbringing. And I mean, the best stuff from my perspective back then was sports. I had a handful of close friends who lived actually in the neighborhood. Neighborhood here, it's called Chapman Woods, and so Pasadena is on the east side of LA, and I'm on the east side of Pasadena, so I can walk to places called Temple City and Arcadia and Monrovia, if people have heard of those. And so the streets are really wide, and there's not a lot of cars, not a lot of car traffic on our streets. So so we're talking late 80s, and for any hockey fans, that's when Wayne Gretzky came to the LA Kings. So suddenly there's this huge surge of interest in hockey, and rollerblades kind of become a thing. So this is all happening at the exact same time when I'm like 8, 9, 10 years old, and so are all my buddies. So all we're doing is playing roller hockey every single day.
Yeah.
And this is also the days, which I don't know if it happens too often now, but I could just wave goodbye to my mom in the kitchen and then just go and just leave and go like wherever I wanted to. I go like 3 blocks down the street to my buddy Fred's house. I could pick him up. We could go like a mile up the street and go to 7-Eleven, get Slurpees, or go a mile in the other direction, go to a baseball card shop. Again, I've heard that's not the thing anymore, and you could you could get locked up for child abuse or neglect or something. But I was really lucky to grow up in a very safe and like supportive area like that. I was lucky in 1,000 ways. And so, my main thing was just like sports with my buddies. I was outside all the time, and, me and them we forged friendships. We had our tiffs here and there. And I mean, just like probably everyone does, but looking back as an adult, and now, I mean, I'm sure you and your listeners, you have friends who have kids, and you can kind of like look at childhood again through the eyes of an adult, and you realize how important those silly little interactions are to, forging yourself as an adult. So I'm lucky. I'm not, the victim of any traumas. Both of my parents were fantastic. I got along with my sisters. So I kind of escaped unscathed. And I mean, like I said, lucky in 1,000 ways. So here I am.
Yeah. I mean, so I definitely want to come back to that real quick, but I mean, that was the days, that hockey days. That was what Mighty Ducks was coming out, right?
Oh yeah.
That was influencing every kid.
Yeah.
It's funny. One of my good friends growing up, I've talked to him pretty recently, and it was like, yeah, you know, his dad's from Minnesota, but he grew up here in Alabama, and so he was like, I was like, oh, the reason why you played hockey growing up was because of your dad. He goes, no, I started playing hockey because of Mighty Ducks.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, here in Birmingham, we have like youth hockey leagues, or at least we did,
Yeah.
you know, 15, 20 years ago. But anyway, so
You're
it's funny, that hockey reference. Yeah, man.
yeah.
Um,
And I mean, my parents are from Detroit. They're both born
oh,
and raised in
yeah.
Detroit, Michigan. They met at the University of Detroit. My dad went to med school, University of Michigan. That's where all my cousins, every aunt and uncle I have, they're all out. In Michigan, it's unofficially called Hockey Town, and you know the Red Wings are a big thing.
Oh
And I
man,
went to
Stanley
games.
Cups, and yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
a lot of like great legacy, great history
Mhm.
with that sport. And then, you know, when Gretzky came to the Kings when I'm a kid, like they started building rinks around LA. There's a lot of rinks in Los Angeles, like more than I could actually name.
Mhm.
And like your story, a lot of people came out of the woodwork who are from Minnesota or Canada, and they started coaching and
Mhm.
running clinics and stuff. It was like right place, right time if you wanted to try a new sport that's actually, you know, really exciting, really fun, gives you a good exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's just funny being in Alabama, and I imagine the same thing in LA. You go to this freezing cold rink, and then you come out and you just like, I got to take all of my
Yeah, it's
stuff
90
off.
degrees.
It's
Yep,
90
that's
degrees.
just normal. That's normal.
So yeah, you mentioned, man, grid childhood growing up, low trauma. I mean, that's you know. So what do you feel like, what mindsets, especially in that adolescent time, that you really developed that now you really serves you in your adulthood?
Yeah, it's such a great question. Um, I remember, so again, I was lucky to have like a core group of buddies who like I would have done anything for them and vice versa. And I think,
Yeah.
and I remember back, you know, junior high, high school, not everybody had that. And also not everybody had sort of a trauma-free childhood. So getting older, you kind of you can think back to those days and just imagine what some of the guys and gals around you might have been going through. And of course, as an adolescent, like you're so in your own head. It's like your problems are the only things, and they're the biggest things in the world. Like, so
Mhm.
my problems were like a girl that I liked didn't like me, and the world was ending. Like the world was
Oh my
exploding.
gosh, yeah.
Like nothing else matters. And I just remember just like
Mhm.
just thinking and being sad and being mad and bouncing between sad and mad. And then I get a little surge of confidence, like, oh, maybe I could do this. I'm like, oh, that won't work, blah, blah. It's just so silly in retrospect, given,
Mhm.
you know, what other people were dealing with, like divorce or, you know, an older sibling who's like getting in trouble, stuff like that.
Mhm.
But I do remember being insecure, like really, really caring about how people saw me or what they thought about me.
Yeah.
My grades were pretty good. I was a good athlete, um, and I had, you know, a handful of girls that liked me, so I had attention from girls, which I liked. But still, I was insecure, and I guess I didn't really know it at the time. I sort of just accepted it as a part of life. But looking back, I put a lot of effort into how I looked and how I appeared.
Mhm.
And so sort of go through high school, get into college, and it still kind of lingers. And then I don't know, when you get out of college, you're trying to work, and now you're around a lot of other people who are sort of in the same mindset. You sort of you hope that you grow out of things like that, but they, at least in my case, it kind of just morphed into an adult version
Yeah.
of
Mm.
anxiety, of like hyper awareness of how I appear.
Mm.
And I really didn't understand that or delve into it until very recently. I'm 41 years old, and I wish someone had told me, or just, I don't know, I had figured it out earlier. But so anyway, the last like year or two, that's just something I've been looking at a lot. Man, it's just like it's opened up this gigantic, it's like an old book, a big
Yeah.
thick book that's been on your shelves since as
Mhm.
long as you can remember. You don't know what it is or never open up. You open it up, you blow all the dust off, and then you
Yeah.
realize that all this knowledge has been right at your fingertips for so long. That's
Mhm.
exactly what it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. part of me wants to jump ahead right there, because I mean, a lot of things, as I'm realizing through the interviewing men like you and my coaching sessions, as well as myself, part of my journey is that humbling moment that led me to kind of put the mirror up and stop trying to live my life through the eyes of other people.
Yep.
And fit, like constantly molding yourself, whatever environment you're in. So yeah, what was there to really start doing that? Was there a moment? Was there a time of humility or just experience where you're like, man, why do I keep doing this? So yeah, I'm just curious. Like you said, something in the last year that you've just been doing.
Yeah. It coincided with the pandemic. And I would say that COVID had a giant hand in this. So after I popped out of college in Los Angeles, I left California for a while. I went to DC, and I'm curious if this pops up in your coaching sessions. But my theory is that young men and boys, they stuff that their fathers tell them sticks in their brain, really sticky. Like they're almost like,
oh man,
like side comments that your father will say that just you'll take them, it'll be at the front of your brain for like the rest of your life. So anyway, one of those things I remember my dad said that he definitely doesn't remember.
Yeah, exactly. For him, like you said, it's a side comment.
Exactly. Yeah. It will never leave. He said Washington DC is the most powerful city on planet Earth, and he didn't really give much context, whether it's like talking about Congress or talking about the military or whatever it is, but like that stuck in my head, and it sort of worked itself into this narrative of what I wanted out of my adulthood. So I kind of like pinned my eyes on that city. So I moved to DC and I was there for about 9 years, and I worked for a nonprofit and I worked for the government for 5.5 years. And after 5 years, I wanted to try something else, and I moved to New York. So New York is a different beast. I don't think there's anything in the world that is like New York as a city. It's like hyper energetic, but in a professional sense.
Yeah.
And so I started working at a PR agency, public relations agency. And then the pandemic hits like right after I start working there. And so now, instead of going to the office and having coworkers that I can sort of like, chat with or whatever, I'm sitting on my bed in Lower Manhattan and just zooming into everything. And so I'm the brand new guy. They've already sort of set up their culture. Like everyone knows each other. They all seem to be best friends. And here I am, this guy on Zoom. And so, there's no way I'm the only person who this happened to. But anyway, my last meeting of the day was sometimes at 4:30, but by April it was at 5:30, and by July it was at like 8 o'clock, and by August it's as if I'm on call 24 hours a day. And it's like maybe no one's fault, but this organization that had been used to operating under a certain set of circumstances suddenly had a pandemic. Everyone's home, and you can kind of keep everybody on call, and if you have clients you need to make happy, you kind of like you make it happen. And so I'm like going crazy. I'm totally underslept, and my anxiety is hitting levels it had never hit before. I never considered myself an anxious person. You line up like 10 people who know me, like, no, Brent's like pretty even keel.
Yeah.
But I just like, my heart's always going and my mind is racing. It's like a pinball game where the ball shoots in a direction and then you have to like catch it, and then it shoots another direction. You're like, where is it? That's my mind was total chaos. And so meanwhile, I'm really self-conscious about how I appear to my coworkers and to my clients. Like they think that I'm an anxious mess, or that I don't know what I'm talking about, or I was 5 minutes late to a meeting, and my mind would automatically go to the worst case scenario. And again, like this, it feels exactly like how I felt as a 13-year-old seventh grader, where like the girl I like walks by and I'm like, oh crap, is my hair okay? You know what I mean? It's just it's so like involuntary, automatic, like lizard brain sort of reactions.
Right.
So I mean, that's kind of, it felt like the through line with my with what I was doing in childhood. So anyway, I got fired. I got fired in October 2020. It's like a big reason why I moved home. I'm like, well, I could get another job here in New York,
Mhm.
but I'm probably going to have the same problems. So I need to change
Mhm.
something up like massively. So I never thought I would move back to LA, like never in a
Mhm.
million years, but suddenly like something clicked in my head and I'm like, all right, there's something going on in my brain that is not quite right. And what's more important than having a job, a salary, and my own apartment is like fixing that. And so
Mm.
moving home
Yeah.
was the decision to make. And then, like you said, sort of putting the mirror in front of yourself. Um, that's what I've been doing for the last
Yeah.
year and a half. And it's been 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but
Yep.
absolutely, absolutely the best thing I ever did. And I feel
Mhm.
so bad because I know, I'm sure you know people who haven't been able to do that because it's hard. It's a
Oh,
level of
yeah.
vulnerability that we're not really taught or encouraged to encounter with ourselves. But God, it's worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think we're so used to a life and people we look up to, even of, it's all about what you got around you that makes you great.
Mhm.
But like the ability to be anywhere and just be present and be yourself is so powerful. And going on that journey, like you said, when you said 2 steps forward, 1 step back, it's so true, because what it happens is you got to be in a place where you start feeling that insecurity and anxiety start building up. You go,
Mhm.
nope, I'm not listening to that.
Yep.
That fear is trying to distort my reality. And I then can't be myself and present who I am and be present in the moment of, this is who I am, take it or leave it kind of mindset. And really that journey of that like self-talk, those mindsets start getting developing. And it's a long journey. And that's what, like, I really appreciate you bringing that up, Brent, because really for my audience out there, like that journey is hard.
Mhm.
That journey, it takes repetition, but it's
Yep.
such a wanted journey, because like we don't have success or funny or finances or build all this like life around us just for that. It's like we want to be able to enjoy all that, right? We
Mhm.
want to have the character and the present and within ourselves to actually enjoy it.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I think there's just too much. I mean, human history is full of people that just were so uncomfortable with themselves. So they just made money and built empires and did all this stuff. But deep down, they still were feeling alone, scared, terrified little kids.
Yep.
And man, there was a lot you just said in there, because it's really interesting is when we're a little kid and we undress those things, is that little kid is still inside, like screaming, and he lays dormant for a while until something happens. I mean, that happened to me at, 26 years old.
Mhm.
Very similar story, just like like feeling like I can't even get out of bed. I feel like I just want to hide. I don't even want to be in bed. I want to be living underneath it. I'm just so terrified. So
Brutal.
anyway, man, that was so good, Brent. I appreciate you jumped ahead to kind of present day. Been a great ending, by the way. But anyway,
Oh, thanks. Thanks.
I want to just backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
First, yeah, what made you go to USC? Southern Cal. Were you a Trojan fan growing up, or you
Oh
just,
man.
yeah?
So my father actually works at USC. He's the chairman
Ah,
of department of the medical school. So I didn't want to go to USC at all. Not because I had anything against it, but again, going back to the hockey thing, I was playing
yeah.
hockey a lot. You do something as much as I did hockey, you're bound to get good at it. So I was on a
Yeah.
travel team. We were traveling all over the country, up into Canada,
Mhm.
and this was like what I love doing, and I was good at it. And
Life
so
was simple. Yeah.
it was simple. Yeah, it's an easy, kind of narrative. Early, you're good at this thing, then go do it. I'm not very tall though. I'm 5'8", and there's not a lot of 5'8" pro players out there. But I mean, this is when I was, 15, 16, 17. I'm trying to decide what I'm going to do for the next chapter. And the natural thing to do when you play hockey is to go to college where they have a good hockey team, which is not California. So I
Mhm.
applied to 10 universities. 9 of them were outside California. They were in Pennsylvania, Notre Dame, Boston College, that kind of thing. And in retrospect, that wasn't such a great idea
Yeah.
because I was good, but not that good. And I toured a few colleges in the Midwest and on the East Coast. And I couldn't tell you the reasons, but it was just very like something just didn't click. It just didn't feel right. And then I toured USC. It's a half hour from my house, from my family. I know people who are going to go there. And I changed my mind. It worked its way up my sort of ranking system of where I'd want to go. And it just made too much sense not to go there. Plus, there's this funny little thing called tuition remission. When one of your parents is on faculty, you don't have to pay tuition. It means you do have to pay all the fees and lab fees and housing and all that stuff, but the gigantic tuition price tag is not a thing. So I basically went for free, and so did my sister, to USC. I didn't go because that university particularly had anything that I wanted to study. I was undeclared my entire freshman year, which I thought was fantastic, because I got to open up the class book and just see whatever sounded interesting. And I could take that. I took astronomy, which ended up being my favorite teacher that I ever had. This guy, if you can picture Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam, he looked exactly like that. He's got these kind of longish locks, and he's running back and forth in front of the class, like trying to demonstrate how big the universe is. And he's like his pits are sweating. The guy was fantastic. And after class, like half the class would just stay after class, just peppering them with questions. That was awesome. I took like East Asian languages and cultures. I took philosophy. I took intro to entrepreneurship. I took public policy, just like anything I wanted. It was really, really, really cool sort of academic exploration. And then I bumped into sophomore year, I bumped into a buddy who was on my floor freshman year. And I'm like, hey, and we're catching up. I'm like, what's been going on? And then I'm like, hey, what's your major? And he says, public policy. And I'm like, well, what is that? And he's like, well, it's kind of like how you run a city or a state. And I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty interesting. So I ran to the office where you change your major, and I changed my major. And then I did a year of public policy classes, which I loved. So one of the classes would be sitting in a circle, and the proctor would drop like a piece of paper in the middle of us, and someone pick it up and read it, and it would be like a problem. Be like, teen alcohol abuse is like on the rise. Here are the resources you have. Here's the money. Here are your options. Like, how do you fix the problem? I loved that stuff. Like, loved it. So I did that for my whole sophomore year. And then I bumped into another buddy, exact same scenario of a different person. I'm like, hey, what's your major? And they said, I'm international relations. I'm like, well, what does that mean? He's like, well, it's kind of like public policy, but instead of a state or a country, it's the entire world. I'm like, yes. So then I ran over and I changed my major to international relations. And then 6 months later, 9/11 happened. And that set off my entire career after that.
Yeah. And so that led you, so how much longer after graduation did that lead to the decision to go to DC and work for the government?
9/11 happened. It was the fall semester of my junior year.
Okay.
So I had, I declared my major, but not done a lot of coursework toward it. And I mean, on September 12th, once I'd had time to sort of digest and actually just learn, like, I don't know who Osama bin Laden was on September 10th. Like, no one I knew him either. I couldn't have explained to you what, Islamic fundamentalism or political Islam is all about, but it felt like the most important thing in the world, and also felt like it would be that for a while.
Right.
It was so mysterious, and it came from almost literally the other side of the earth, from a culture that like none of us have much familiarity with at all. So we could all take guesses as to why this happened, but it's gonna take a long time for us to really figure it out. And I don't know, it's just like something I gradually learned about myself. It's like the most harrowing thing or concept or phenomenon in the world is the thing that I am most interested in. And so the answer to your question is like immediately, like once I sort of got to digest what 9/11 was all about, there was no other option of what I would do with my life other than go to DC and do that.
And so what about 9/11 was such the trigger point? Is it because this, like you said, it sounded like the world had been flipped upside down, and here was this group in Afghanistan that had enough clout to take down large, massive buildings in the biggest city,
Yeah.
Like, it's just like you said, like, I'm like, as you're talking, I'm like going back, I'm like, oh yeah, that was such a strange event in our history that is somewhat being pulled away from still,
Yeah.
but it is such a big thing that happened. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's
Hmm.
closer to a movie than real life as
Oh
we
yeah.
understand it, right? I mean,
Mhm.
there weren't many people that weren't slack-jawed just watching this all take place. So I'm 21. This thing happened right around my 21st birthday. And again, I was lucky enough to have parents with means. They were
Yeah.
decently wealthy so that I didn't have to care for too much, meaning that I didn't have to go work at an ice cream shop. I didn't have to go work
Mhm.
at a valet at some restaurant somewhere. I had enough money where I could use my time in college to pursue my academic or intellectual
Yeah.
interests. That's like a major, major thing that a lot of people don't have. I mean, I think it's only
Mm.
30%. It's like 3 out of 10
Yeah.
American citizens are able to go to a 4-year university like I did. So like that needs to be on the table to, sort of conceive of this trajectory that I'm taking. So I've got the time and I've got the ability to sort of learn a lot of things and really dive into my classes because I'm not jumping in the car and running off to
Mhm.
a minimum wage day job somewhere. So as I go through my freshman and sophomore years, I'm finding out I like academia. I like being a student.
Mhm.
Uh, I liked doing all the readings. I didn't like taking tests. I'm not a great test taker,
Yeah.
but if they give out awards for doing homework and doing all your reading, I would be an A+ student.
Yeah.
So with that backdrop, I'm looking at the towers collapsing,
Mhm.
3,000 Americans dying who had no sense of the lack of safety that they were under.
Yeah.
And kind of, I was mortified, like embarrassed for myself of not knowing that this was a thing or that this is something that we should all be paying attention to. I felt like an ignorant American.
Because they
And
attacked the World Trade Center 2 years before that, didn't they?
was it 93? I think it was like
93.
8 years
Sorry.
before.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was
8 years.
there
Yeah.
was a truck bomb that went off in the basement of the World Trade Center. Yeah, it's good memory. And
Mhm.
there was also like a biplane that like clipped the building some other year. I forget when that was. But yeah, so I have a lot of buddies, not a lot. I have a few buddies who looked at 9/11 and their reaction was anger. They wanted to join the military or, like
Yeah.
anger was coming out of them. I don't have a lot of anger in my own personal constitution. I'm a pacifist, maybe to a fault. I don't really like conflict. When people are
Mhm.
arguing, I'm like, I'll be in the next room, let me know when you guys are done type of
Yeah.
thing. So it was fully like an academic intellectual issue for me that I felt really silly that I didn't understand. That's what launched my professional trajectory.
Huh. Yeah, that's interesting. So when you get to DC, what I'm so curious. I mean, because I'm looking at your bio and all these places that you've been and Arabic and um yeah, what made you then, I guess, yeah, what was your first assignment into Middle Eastern, I guess, put like the political realm of Islamic politics, and
Yeah.
I'm losing my train of thought here. But anyway, yeah. So just, yeah, I'm curious.
Yes. So I immediately signed up to take Arabic classes. So like,
Mhm.
again, I'm 21, 22, and in my brain, I'm not going to do anything else with my life other than this. I want to know about this. Like
Have you always, I mean, it sounds like you went from hockey to this, like your obsessive nature. Like, I am going to be, this is what I'm going, and then now that I'm on this, I'm going to just like, I'm just going for it.
Yeah.
100%. Is that your
It,
nature generally? Yeah.
yeah, I do. I go pretty 100%. I'm pretty
Yeah.
into like what I'm into.
Hmm.
There was a little window in there. So, I mean, I played Division II college hockey. They have a D2 team at USC, and I played on it.
Oh,
And we
cool.
we were good compared to the Pac-10. We beat the Pac-10
Yeah.
almost every year I was there,
Hmm.
but we weren't, competitive nationally, obviously, Division II.
Hmm.
So that started to become apparent to me my sophomore year, which is also the time where I'm like choosing a major and see what I'm
Hmm.
going to study. So there was a window where I was like a free agent. Like, well, all right,
Yeah.
what am I going to do with my life? Which in a lot of ways, that's what college is all about.
Right. Oh,
I
yeah.
had that like 1 or 2 year window where and it wasn't bad. I mean, I'm in college, so some drinking happens and meeting new friends, and there's
Mhm.
parties and there's social stuff to do. So I was distracted enough not to be haunted by the fact that I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. Like people who maybe don't have the means that my family had of not going to college, they don't have that kind of window where you can just sort of throw caution to the wind and do whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But so once I decided I was going to do what Middle Eastern, Islamic relations, geopolitics, geostrategy, global security,
And let me
then
ask just this,
yeah,
and this, the purpose of that was really, you wanted to be a bridge between the Western world and Middle Eastern world. Is that, or what was generally in your mind? Or you just really were just, I got to know more about this.
yeah,
Period.
it was that. It was to be a student of this.
Okay.
Yeah, because I wouldn't claim to have understood it very well on September 12th, like the day
Right.
after. I didn't have it all in my brain. So first step was going to be learn as much as possible. So I signed up to take Arabic classes, and I took,
Yeah.
oh my God, I took like, I've lost track of how many classes I took. I took classes at USC, UCLA, Middlebury in Vermont, Emory in Atlanta, Georgia, at the International Language Institute in DC. And then I got a graduate degree in the American University in Cairo in Egypt. So I was there for a year. So
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
this is a multi-year education.
Yeah.
2001 until
Mhm.
2007 when I finished my grad degree, and now it's time. Now I go to DC and I apply to sort of the agencies and organizations you would kind of imagine. And the spot where I land is called Human Rights Watch.
Mhm.
And so they do human rights all over the world, but I got swallowed into the Middle East division. So I'm an associate there, and there's 2 associates and about 13 researchers, and each researcher has a different part of the Middle East. So one guy will have Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia. Another woman will have Egypt and Libya, and they
Mhm.
are writing furiously, like either short press releases or 100-page reports on like torture in prisons, on the mistreatment of migrant workers from India and the Philippines, in the United Arab Emirates, or water rights crisis in Yemen. And all of everything they are writing is coming to me to like proofread it, edit it, and then format it for publication. So I'm reading every single word that these people are writing about the Middle East. And that was a gigantic education in and of itself.
Oh man, that's yeah, it's so unique, Brent. So yeah, what led then? I'm just oh man, I lost my train of thought here.
It's all
That's
right.
so like there was so much that you just hit in there. But yeah, I mean, so then um yeah, tell me what happened after, where like oh yeah, this is what I was curious about. So you're a
Mhm.
Catholic boy growing up,
Yeah.
and then you're exposed to Arabic. How much of the Quran did you get into, and
Mhm.
really understanding that influence on a group, on that area of the world? And um, yeah, anyway, so I'm just kind of
Yeah.
curious on the religious side of it. Did it
Yeah.
hit it all?
That's a great question. So when you take Arabic language classes, you can't avoid learning about Arab culture and about Islam, the religion. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'd say I know a fair amount about
Yeah.
Islam and the Quran. It's written in a very like old style Arabic that like no one really speaks anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's like maybe Shakespearean English. So if someone was speaking Shakespearean, it would sound kind of weird, but you get the gist of much of it.
Right.
I wasn't so Catholic that I sort of bristled at learning about Islam. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's another. It's actually, I would say, remarkably similar to Christianity.
Mm.
Maybe not in. I think acculturation is the word. You
Yeah.
can let me know if I'm wrong about that, but basically, the manifestation of how American Christians practice their faith. Like, if you were to ask a Christian at church, like, what are the 5 principles of Christianity, they probably give you 5 things that somebody 100 years ago would not give you. Meaning,
Yeah.
like, it's the same religion, but it can like morph and fade and twist
Become
and
very
turn.
cultural to the,
Exactly.
yeah.
It can mold itself to the times in which it finds itself in. And
Mm-hmm.
Islam is kind of no different. It's just like any other religion. It does that. So 100 years ago, most Muslims would say, "Oh, we're all about this," whereas now they say something different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Muslims love to say that their religion is a religion of peace. And in, of course, many ways it is, but there's a lot of violence in Islamic history, just like there's a ton of violence in Christian history.
Mhm.
So the Quran is written in this, weird squiggly language called Arabic. It's preached from pulpits with men with like really, really long beards and really ornate robes, and all this stuff is totally foreign to people like you or me or your listeners who are just
Mhm.
used to going to church on Sundays and listening to someone they know, speak
Right.
about on the
Yeah.
Bible. But the surface level understanding of Islam is so different. It's almost shocking to the senses. But when you scratch a little bit under the surface, it's remarkably similar. And I don't know, I have a couple theories on this. I'd love to know what you think, but about this. Islam was forged as a religion for tribes in the desert.
Huh.
And I think Christianity was too. If
Yeah.
if my if my my history is right on that. And
Well, I mean,
so
you got to think, Moses wrote the first book of the Bible, first 5 books, and he was in a desert for most of his life.
yeah, I think it checks out.
Jesus was, I mean, Galilee is actually not necessarily desert. I mean, it's pretty green and beautiful, actually.
Hmm.
But I mean, he was a nomad walking around, son of a carpenter.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's interesting that I mean, that time, and then Christianity really grew from people being nomadic or really being transient, I guess, in a
Yeah.
way. I mean, Paul was a tent maker, Apostle
Wow.
Paul, who really traveled all the way from, modern day Israel to modern day Italy and Greece and Turkey, kind of
Yeah.
right around the Mediterranean area.
Yep.
So it's interesting. Yeah, it is. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So the thought that comes to mind is like, all right, you got Islam, you got Christianity, and you've also got Judaism. And it feels like they were all three of these religions were incubated in the deserts of the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
So they are sort of calibrated to help a tribe survive against other tribes, against famine, against the cold. So there's
Yeah.
something about these religions that like kept these people together
Mm-hmm.
and help them sort of send their progeny into the next generation. And this is, on top of the millions and millions and millions of tribes that didn't make it. And
Mm-hmm.
so this is one of the theories for why religious devotion is present in like 80% of people in the world. But I have a feeling that those three religions are not well calibrated for the type of society we've built here in the United States. This hyper modern, digitized, you might say urban kind of environment,
Mm-hmm.
which I think helps explain the explosive popularity of things like Buddhism and yoga. Because Buddhism, Taoism, Hinduism, I mean, those were forged in a different place in a different time, like
Right.
in 500 AD, I think it was, or BC. It's one of the 500s. In Buddhism, the Siddhartha Gautama like came out of the hills of southern Nepal
Mm-hmm.
into northern India, and he was in an urban setting. And this is when urbanization is starting, where people aren't in tribes anymore. They're gonna go to the city, they're gonna leave their family, and they're gonna try to make money and send it back to their family who live in the small town. And so when they're in this brand new city, they don't know anybody. They don't have a tribe, they don't have family. So there
Mm-hmm.
needs to be something that sort of gets them through psychologically, this being separate and dissociated from the people they used to rely on. And that's
Yeah.
why I think, and this is a theory, that things like meditation, mindfulness, and oneness were sort of the underpinnings of the Buddhist religion, and why they apply really well to us living now, because we don't live in tribes. Like I lived away from my family on the other side of the country
Mm-hmm.
for over a decade, and lots of my friends don't live near their family now either. And I feel like to help get through the anxiety, the creeping depression, the feeling that you're not good enough, you're not working hard enough, you're not making enough money, you don't have a big enough house, you don't have a spouse, you don't have the things, the trappings that modern life demands of you, that
Mm-hmm.
things that Christianity and Islam, they can fall short in like delivering to you directly what you need to make yourself okay, as not being perfect.
And you're saying that in the context that, those Middle Eastern religions really are more communal versus you're saying Buddhism really addresses more of an individual context of the person.
Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I mean, I think the only pushback I would say is Christianity really, like Jesus, like it's very much a more, he came for the person, the individual, the one, versus, the many, like a lot of the parables, the looking for the one, leaving the 99 for the one, that kind of language that we, there's nothing we can do within ourselves. We need him, the individual. So I don't know. That's an interesting, from an outsider's like looking at, because they all, like you said, they all started within like a 600-year, Judaism really started, 100 BC, even though Moses wrote it, thousands of years before that. But Judaism really didn't start, and then Christianity obviously started with Jesus, and then right after that was Islam. Because I think even Muhammad's mother-in-law was a Christian, I believe. So, but anyway, it's just interesting. It's just a fascinating discussion because I think you're right, because there is something tribal, communal that. Yeah, but I don't know. It's just interesting because I think you're right. We have bastardized Christianity in the West, particularly in America. We've turned it into a, fast cash system.
Yeah, one could say. I think you're right, actually, that there are things in the Bible, potentially in the New Testament, that addresses some of this stuff. How to be forgiving to other people, but also forgive yourself. Don't beat yourself up for mistakes you make, and to be centered.
One thing it just made me think of this was like the two greatest commandments that Jesus said, love the Lord your God, and the second was love your neighbor as yourself.
Oh yeah.
Meaning I gotta learn how to love myself to love other people, and so that's personal focus. But anyway, that thought. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean.
Yeah, I think we can go on the religious trail.
We got a lot of options where to go with this.
Yeah, but I think just being in that environment as a Westerner and being such intentional with studying those people, the language. I just was curious what your experience with the Quran. But yeah, so give me. I guess probably as we're coming up on time here, but just what was something, an experience that stood out in the Middle East that you really took with you?
Oh man. So I lived in Egypt for a year. When I started working, that was grad school. I started working in the government. I lived in Saudi Arabia for a little over a month.
Wow.
I lived in Ankara, Turkey for a little over a month. I lived in Jerusalem for about a month too. And have you been to Jerusalem, Cartwright?
I have, yeah.
You have? Okay.
Yeah. Went to the West Bank. Yeah. Went to the, what is that part of Jerusalem where it's like broken up in all three religions or four religions?
You're right. The old city is sectioned off. There's sections. There's the Muslim quarter. There's the Armenian quarter. There's the Christian quarter. And then what am I forgetting?
Islam.
Yeah.
Did you say that?
I may have said that. Oh well, we can rewind. Anyway, you got this like old city, and being there, as you know, it's mind-blowing because like so much of the world sees this place as so important, and it's separated by identities. And I'll never forget, I was in the Muslim quarter, which actually is right next to the Wailing Wall, which is one of the major spots for
weird.
From the Jewish religion. You probably saw exactly what I saw.
The Golden Dome's like literally right over it.
Yeah. You'll be on the street, and all around you are, carts selling stuff, and stores that are selling trinkets, and restaurants serving Israeli breakfast, and everyone is Palestinian and Arab, and they're all speaking Palestinian Arabic. And then you will see a very Orthodox Jewish man walking down this street, and he'll have the ceremonial headdress on. So this is an important day for him. He just got done praying at the Western Wall, and you see him coming, and then the air shifts somehow. Everyone gets a little quiet, Everyone's actions are a little muted
Yeah.
as this man walks by, and his eyes are down, staring at the ground. He's walking pretty quickly. He doesn't love being there. And there's no one says anything. There's no violence, but that tension is something that obviously stuck with me. I remembered it till now. I think this is 11 years ago, but it's pretty sad that Christianity's been around for 2,000 years, but we're stuck in our little tribes, I guess.
Yeah.
And you know, it's sad. And I think as Americans, or you know, people like you and I and your listeners who are living through this really wild experiment, if a pluralistic society can get along with itself, and if people from different religions and races and ethnicities, if we can all come together and like sketch out a society that is like pretty nice and pretty fair for everybody, then maybe it's us who can be the ones, it should be us to transcend this tribalism that seems to be getting worse.
Right.
In the media, like in politics, of course, it's all pretty gross. It feels like we're in the one step back part of the 2 steps forward, one step back sequence.
I hope you're right, Brent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause it really is. That's just, I mean, it was the first time I ever really felt prejudice because of my skin color or how I looked was in the Muslim quarter. I mean, just like, cause you know, it's so narrow, it gets backed up. And you're literally standing outside this guy's store and you can't move. And I'm with like 3 of my Israeli friends. And then one of my friends who's American, he's a Black American. And this guy comes out of the store and is just like, in whatever language, get out of here, you know, get the F out of, you know, it's like, I'm like, oh, interesting. And that was like you're saying, I just started feeling that tension, you know, like moving from the Jewish quarter to the Islamic. And like you said, like some people said, oh, that's really cool, they're sharing. It's like, no, they're not really sharing.
doesn't feel like sharing. No, it doesn't feel like a convivial type of place.
But it's weird how we really, like, even in America, like you're saying, and I you know, social media is playing a part of this. Is it's not religion, but it's ideology for sure. That we're divided on ideology and we're demonizing one another. And there's no like conversation. There's no like, you know, like, hey, let me just have some empathy for where you're coming from, you know?
Yeah, the internet is not designed for that kind of thing. It's not designed for 2 people who have vastly different ideas about life or about their own identities to like hash it all out. Unfortunately, it's just not. And the pandemic's made it so much worse. It's pushed us all inside for 2 full years. We're not getting the feeling of community we used to have. Like, when was the last time you went to a civic center or, you know, just like chatted with a stranger? It happened not very often the last 2 years. And people need an identity. They want something good to think of themselves as, or as a part of. And it's back to our tribal nature, but the options have been dwindling badly for the last decade, almost down to nothing. And what we have is the internet. And there are absolutely communities on the internet, but man, a lot of those are super fired up to identify themselves as the opposite or as hostile to another community. And I really hope that our benevolent government can help us with that. But it's also on each one of us to first of all know that that's happening and try to reverse that trend in ourselves and in each other.
Yeah, because that, I mean, like you're saying, that was the dividing part of it. Is that's what was so bad about COVID, because it then created sides from a political and ideology standpoint.
Yep.
So therefore I couldn't be with my friends who leaned a different way because they had a belief about the pandemic that and so you're just like, and so therefore you just end up more and more your silo. And you're just like, God, dog, man, how the heck? We were already struggling before this.
Yeah, let's make it worse.
Let's throw gasoline on this. It's interesting just to find the courage to start, like, going back to what that big revelation you had in your apartment in New York City of starting to go after this is like, how can we do that in the context of just the courage to hear somebody to say something that I don't like.
Yeah.
and not then put a stereotype on them, to not put some language or identity onto them because of what they said, but just actually hear them for what their words are, and then choose to disagree or have a rebuttal, or, hey, I could still love you, still be friends with you, still interact with you, still do life with you, but hey, we just disagree on this. And
Yeah, absolutely. And of course that work starts with the self. Because you are much more likely to be empathetic to someone else if you like really delved into yourself and
absolutely.
lived like an introspective, like self-examining life. Because for me personally, again, I was lucky enough not to have had trauma done to me when I was a kid, but that doesn't mean I'm free of insecurities and things I want to improve in myself. And the process of trying to figure all that out is to delve into my childhood. And so since my childhood was idyllic, I mean, that means that most people around me had something worse going on. And but I will also never know that. I will never ever understand the intricacies and depths of what other people have been through. And that means it is very possible they've been through something terrible, and then that terrible thing is now affecting how they treat me or how they treat someone online. And so just diving into all this, which is very hard, it's extremely humbling. You pop out the other end with just endless, hopefully with endless empathy, especially for the people who treat you the worst. So like people in my job, or people online, or someone of a different political party. I mean, yeah, they seem pretty terrible, pretty unscrupulous. They don't walk by your moral standard, but you also don't know how bad their life has been, and this is all they can muster at this moment. And so like keeping that in mind is just like, not only does it make for a more empathetic and peaceful world, but it makes for less chaos inside yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, God, you hit on that. That's really good, because I mean, to get to that place where you see someone who's writing in all caps, exclamation point, expletive, to not immediately then, all right, this person's in throw out whatever language, but actually go, wow, they are really hurting.
Yeah. Yeah.
To that be your first response, and then like you can kind of have your head about you and not react in a way that's just that's literally just a quick reaction. I think that's the problem with the internet right there in itself, is that we can literally just snap reaction and think we're right, and really not have a full dialogue, full understanding of facial expressions and beyond just words. And
you'll post something that's on the internet for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Oh man. Oof.
Yeah.
Well, Brent, this was good, man. I mean, I guess we're kind of coming up on time here, but one final question I will give, because I like this question, and somebody who's lived a lot of life like yourself, what's now knowing what you know now, what would you tell yourself at 25?
Oh my God. Yeah, I wish. So there's this study I heard about years ago where they surveyed people on their deathbed and asked them what their biggest regret was. And most of them said that I lived the life that I thought other people wanted me to live instead of the life I wanted to live.
Yeah.
And knowing that is just so cool, to have that foresight, to not be on your deathbed, still have the wherewithal to change your life and improve it in a good way. I luckily didn't have to contend with that. From an early age, I got to do a lot of stuff that I wanted to do. So I was infinitely lucky in that respect. But if I could go back, I would force myself to go through this self-examination 20 years ago that I did now 20 years ago, to learn about yourself and learn about how like kind of you operate, and ergo how others operate. And the more you learn about that, the more empathy you have, the less hateful and sort of blaming you'll be vis-a-vis your problems towards other people. It's this secret that, I don't know, no one really tells you, but you're thank God you're working in a profession that helps people, like leads people to this type of of introspection, which is so important, not only for the self, but for
Mhm.
your relations with everyone around you. I wish I had examined my own insecurities, the reasons why they still linger. And then there's a whole universe on the internet, ironically, of ways to help yourself through it and actually conquer it. So that's what I wish I could have done.
Man, that's great. That's really true. God, introspection at a younger age.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ability to actually like ask the hard questions.
Yeah.
And yeah, because then you step into more of who you are, and therefore you end up enjoying life more. And like you said, have more empathy, therefore have better relationships, and kind of
Yeah.
trickles all the way down, doesn't it? So
Yeah. It's night and day for sure.
well, that's cool, Brent. Well, man, is there anything else? Is there a place where my audience can find you, or anything you want to plug about yourself, or
Yeah, I mean, I'm not on Twitter very often, but I have been inspired by the conflict in Ukraine to share some thoughts on there. My name is spelled BrentGiannotta. You just at that on Twitter. And I'm gonna need to build up followers because I'm writing a book about some government stuff. And I know when I go to pitch this thing, they're going to ask me how many Twitter followers I have. And when I tell them not that many, it's not going to go well. So I need people to go on there and pretend like they're interested in what I have to say.
Yeah. So what's the book about?
The book is lessons that I learned being a national security analyst that I think are oddly well equipped to fix the problems that are currently roiling us, both domestically, internationally, and spiritually.
Yeah. Well, when that book starts coming out, man, you'll have to come back on, and everybody, y'all need to start following Brent so he can get that book deal. So more people get what he's saying. So
begging you.
Well, man, I appreciate you coming on, and yeah, good luck on that book writing, because I get that. That's not easy.
Hey, Cartwright, thanks so much for having me. This is so much fun, and what you're doing is a really great thing. I hope you keep doing it.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate that.